Hi guys, Olive here. Here today to talk to you about the books that I read in June 2022. June was pretty chaotic for me, actually. I had a lot of different things going on in my life. I did a bunch of traveling. I also decided to take on 2 different projects that required a lot of reading, and somehow I managed to get everything done. Don't know how I did that, but that means that I have a lot of books to talk about in today's video, so let's get started. So as we have been doing, let's start with fiction. I read the new release from Linda Holmes, who is the author of Evie Drake Starts Over, which was one of my favorite fiction books last year. This new one is called Flying Solo, and it's about a woman who is about to turn 40 years old, returning to her hometown in Maine in order to get her recently departed great aunt's affairs in order, which involves sorting through all of her great aunt's belongings in order to get the house ready to sell. As our main character is doing so, she finds this odd duck. And I mean that literally. It is this mysterious duck decoy that may or may not be valuable. And through the rest of the book, we see our main character, Lori, trying to figure out the secrets behind this duck decoy and some of the secrets her great aunt may have been keeping as well. Just like with Evie Drake Starts Over, I really liked the writing in this book. I thought it was really fun to read, although I found it makes a lot of current references, which I think is going to date this book prematurely. I think someone reading this book, even just a few years from now, is going to find the references very dated, which is unfortunate. You would hope that the book has a longer lifespan than that. But there was just something about this one. It didn't have the same magic as Evie Drake Starts Over. I feel like the pace in Evie Drake was slow, but in a way where it felt relaxing. It felt like that pace was intentional, whereas the slow pace in Flying Solo kind of felt like being stuck in traffic. So this was fun while I was reading it, but it's not all that memorable. But in the month of June, I finally finished my goal of reading through all of Meg Wollitzer's backlist, at least all the novels she wrote for adults. That was my goal, and I finally achieved it. The last book of hers that I had left to read was the second novel she ever wrote, which is called Hidden Pictures. And this is about a woman who works as an illustrator, and she's married to a man that she can't quite connect with. She doesn't really feel present in her marriage, and she also really can't say why. Later on, after these two have a child together, they decide to separate because they are both very unhappy, and the main character begins to date women, which all of a sudden makes her detachment from her ex make a whole lot of sense. Here's the thing about this book. I thought parts of it were really interesting, but unfortunately, those were the parts that Meg Wolitzer decided to speed right past, and instead she lingered on the most uninteresting parts in this book. This book's title is in reference to the main character Laura's profession. She's an illustrator for a highlights-style children's magazine, and the images she is best known for are the hidden pictures images, where you're given a key of hidden pictures that you're supposed to find in the bigger picture. And right at the start of this novel, the main character makes the observation that she wishes her life were like one of those pictures, where she could just be told what she's looking for. Who am I supposed to be? Who am I supposed to be with? What's going to make me happy? Wouldn't life just be so much simpler if we could all just be told what we're looking for and we just go seek it out? But unfortunately, it doesn't happen that way. I loved that observation. I've done those puzzles as a kid a million times, and so I knew immediately what she was talking about. And I thought, because that's her job, that illustration job is what she does all day, I thought that that symbolism was going to be a major part of this book, and it was going to be part of her journey of self-discovery. But it wasn't. That imagery was never even brought up again. Instead, the main character realizes basically immediately that she's gay, and then we just focus on domestic dramas for the rest of this book. I thought this book was just one giant missed opportunity. I also didn't care much for Lullabies for Little Criminals by Heather O'Neill, which was very surprising because Heather O'Neill's latest book is one of my favorite books of the year so far. But I think I just am not the biggest fan of child narrators. And because this book is very character focused and it is hyper focused on that child narrator, I just couldn't connect with this one. I unfortunately don't even have much more to say beyond that. I just didn't enjoy this. But a book I definitely could connect with during the month of June is Rules of Civility by Amor Towles. This is my all-time favorite book. I reread it every single June. And just in case you don't know what this is about, it's about our main character, Katie Content. We first meet her as an older woman, and then we see her looking back at the year 1938 in her life, all the important people who came in and out of her life during that year, and how a lot of the choices she made during that year went on to affect the trajectory of her entire life. I realized this year that I'm low-key waiting every single year for this book not to hit me the way it normally does, because it kind of seems unfathomable to me that one book could hold my heart in the way that this book does. I read a lot of books, as you can see on this channel, and yet none of them even come close to the way this book affects me. And more than that, this book affects me in a different way every single year. I pick up new things and different things stand out to me, largely based on what I'm going through at that time in my life. I found out this year that I know a lot of passages within this book by heart now, which feels really awesome. But also when I picked up this book for this year's reread, I was nearly in tears. And I don't cry very much, but it just felt so good to be back with this book. It felt like coming home again. This is my favorite book. I love it so much. And this will remain my favorite book until some other book out there makes me feel like this, and then some, because it'll take that. But then I also read Election by Tom Perrotta, which is the book that inspired the cult classic film starring Reese Witherspoon and Matthew Broderick. And I read Election in order to prepare myself to read and review its very newly released sequel, which is called Tracy Flick Can't Win. Election is a satire of the New Jersey suburbs, and in it we see teachers and students somewhat, but mainly teachers, behaving atrociously during a campaign for student body president. And I didn't love it, but I thought it effectively sent a message, which is why I was very confused when I began reading Tracy Flick Can't Win, which shows the former high school student all grown up working as the vice principal at a different high school, looking to take on the main principal job, finally. I was confused by Tracy Flick Can't Win because not only is the character of Tracy Flick completely unrecognizable in this sequel, but it also seems like he wrote it for the sole purpose of apologizing for Election, which was a satire. I thought it was horrible for several different reasons, just completely unnecessary. And because of that, it inspired my very first pan that has ever appeared in print, because I reviewed this one for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'll link that for you in the description box below if you want to hear why I hated this book. But on a happier note, I also reviewed This Time Tomorrow by Emma Straub for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And this is what I like to call a dose of science fiction novel, because in this book we see a woman get the opportunity to relive her 16th birthday over and over again, making slightly different decisions each time, and then getting the chance to see how her life turns out. She made those decisions. She gets to keep going back, and she gets to keep trying to make it right, to get it perfect, so she gets the life that she wants. This was such a wonderful surprise. I had no idea how I was going to feel about this one, and I really, really enjoyed it. I will link my review of it in the description box below if you'd like to hear more. And then the last written review of mine that appeared during the month of June was of a short work of translated nonfiction called Land of Women by Maria Sanchez. And this is essentially a feminist manifesto in which the author makes the case that we need to be hearing the voices of rural women, of women who live and work in the countryside. I thought it was really powerful, though I did notice one pretty big thing was missing from this book. If you'd like to hear what that is, if you want to hear more about this book, I'll link my review, which appeared in the Christian Science Monitor, in the description box below. I'm just going to briefly mention the books that I read for projects during the month of June, because there are so many of them. And also, I've already made 2 different videos in which I discuss these books in depth. So I can just point you in that video's direction if you want to learn more. But the first project video that I did, I read 3 books about pandemics in order to prepare myself to make a video about books about pandemics. So those 3 books were How to Prevent the Next Pandemic by Bill Gates, The Viral Storm by Nathan Wolfe, and The Plague Year by Lawrence Wright. I discussed those 3 books in addition to 2 others about pandemics that I had read previously. If you'd like to learn more about any or all of those books, I will link that video for you in the description box below and up in the cards. And then during the month of June, I really randomly got inspired to celebrate the Little Prince Day, which happens every single year on June 29th because it's Antoine de Saint-Exupéry's birthday. But over the past year, I've been seeing all of these different books that have something to do with the Little Prince or its author. And so I had the thought it would be kind of fun to read all of those and then make a video about all of them and put it up on the Little Prince Day. So that's what I did. I reread The Little Prince for the first time since last year when I read it for the first time. Then I read a biography of its author called Saint-Exupéry, written by none other than Stacy Schiff, who wrote Cleopatra, The Witches, amongst other biographies. She is very popular. I also read a motivational book called How to Live Like the Little Prince. I read 2 works of historical fiction called Studio Saint-X and The Prince of the Skies, and I also read a memoir called Fox and I. If you love that children's classic and you want to enhance your understanding of the book and its author, or if you want to read The Little Prince for the first time and you want to make a whole experience out of it by reading other books alongside it or immediately after it, I highly recommend checking out the video I made. I am very proud of it. I'll link it for you in the description box below and up in the cards. Now let's talk nonfiction. First, I read a history book called The Facemaker by Lindsay Fitzharris, which is all about a pioneering plastic surgeon who did life-changing reconstructive work for World War I soldiers who had been very severely injured. Particularly, they had a lot of facial injuries, and that had an impact on their sense of identity because they looked so much different than they did before. And it was incredible hearing about the work that this man and his team did. And it did have such an impact on these men's lives. But occasionally, as I was reading this book, okay, it was more than occasionally, I kind of forgot what book I was reading because there was so much information about the war itself. Now, I understand that was meant to give context, which I do think is necessary to a degree, but I think it actually overwhelmed the story of this plastic surgeon and his patients, which is what I came into this book hoping to read about. So it was a little bit disappointing. It had its good moments when I actually got to read about the plastic surgeon and the men who received the surgeries. But generally speaking, I preferred her last book, The Butchering Art, a whole lot more. But then I also read a memoir called Corrections in Ink by Carrie Blakinger, who is a former figure skater who was arrested on drug charges and served a number of years in prison, which, as the author describes, is a very brutal, illogical world that inmates must figure out how to navigate. In this book, the author talks about the early years in her life, her skating career, but then also the end of that career and how her hyper-focus on success didn't have an outlet once her skating career was over. And so a lot of her obsessive tendencies led her into using drugs, which then led her to doing time. And she talks about all of that within this memoir. And she also talks about how, now that she's out, she's using her writing skills, which are on full display in this memoir, in order to help improve conditions for prisoners, which I think is amazing. I think this is a really well done, really fascinating memoir. I definitely recommend it. And then finally, I read 2 Patrick Radden Keefe books, Say Nothing, which is a book about the Troubles in Northern Ireland, and Rogues, which is his newest book. It is a collection of pieces that he wrote for The New Yorker. Everyone speaks so highly of Say Nothing that I had enormous expectations going into this book, and I was really surprised to find how much I struggled to get into it. Because we start off with the mystery surrounding the disappearance of this mother, and then that's put on ice, more or less, for a long time while we get all this other information about other people and their connections to the IRA. It's only after a long period of time has passed that we circle back around to this mystery now with all those other pieces in place. That's when things really came together for me. That's when this book got exciting to read. But during, I would say, maybe the first third of this book, I wasn't even sure I liked it. So overall, I thought this was really informative, definitely well written. He's a master storyteller, but I preferred Empire of Pain. But where I had really big expectations when it came to Say Nothing, I didn't have quite the same expectations for Rogues. I knew going in that this was a collection of previously published pieces, and I've had experience reading collections of essays or short stories, whatever they may be, and I always end up liking some more than others. It's just the nature of the beast. And that is what ended up happening in the case of Rogues. Some of these pieces I was totally hooked by. I never wanted them to end. And others I found to be rather boring, actually. I kind of wanted to skip them. So because of that, I ended up giving this, I think, 3.5 stars. I'm not sorry I read it. I just don't think I'll ever reread it. So those were the books of June 2022. Again, I have no idea how I managed to get so much done, given what a busy month June was for me, but I'm pleased with the results. If you have any comments or questions about anything I mentioned in this video or about anything in general, I would love to hear from you in the comment section below. The links to all the books that I mentioned in today's video, as well as any additional links I may have promised you, will be linked in the description box below. And at the bottom of that same description box, you'll find links to everywhere you can find me around the internet, including Goodreads and Instagram, the two places where I'm the most active, in case you would like to keep up with what I am reading and writing about right now. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a wonderful day. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.